Nikolaj Frederik Severin Grundtvig, most often referred to as N.F.S.Grundtvig or just Grundtvig, was a Danish pastor, author, poet, philosopher, historian, teacher and politician. He was one of the most influential people in Danish history. His philosophy gave rise to a new form of nationalism in the last half of the 19th century. It was steeped in the national literature and supported by deep spirituality. Grundtvig holds a unique position in the cultural history of his country. Grundtvig and his followers are credited with being very influential in the formulation of modern Danish national consciousness. He was active during the Danish Golden Age, but his style of writing and fields of reference are not immediately accessible to a foreigner. Thus his international importance does not match that of his contemporaries Hans Christian Andersen and Søren Kierkegaard. Biography. Early life and education. Called Frederick rather than Nikolai by those close to him. N.F.S.Grundtvig was the son of a Lutheran pastor, Johan Ottosen Grundtvig. He was brought up in a very religious atmosphere, although his mother also had great respect for Old Norse legends and traditions. He was schooled in the tradition of the European Enlightenment, but his faith and reason was also influenced by German Romanticism and the ancient history of the Nordic countries. In 1791 he was sent to Thuragod in Sigilland to live and study with Pastor Lauritz Svindfeld. He subsequently studied at the Cathedral School of Aarhus from 1798 until graduation. He left for Copenhagen in 1800 to study theology and was accepted to the University of Copenhagen in 1801. At the close of his university life, Grundtvig began to study Icelandic and the Icelandic sagas. Career. In 1805 Grundtvig took a position of tutor in a house on the island of Langeland. The next 3 years he used his free time to study writers Shakespeare, Schiller, and Fichte. In 1802 his cousin, the philosopher Henrik Steffens, returned to Copenhagen full of the teaching of Friedrich Wilhelm Joseph Schelling. His lectures and the early poetry of Adam Oehlenschläger opened Grundtvig's eyes to the new era in literature. His first work, On the Songs in the Edda, attracted no attention. Returning to Copenhagen in 1808, Grundtvig achieved greater success with his Northern mythology, and again in 1809 with the long drama, The Fall of the Heroic Life in the North. Grundtvig boldly denounced the clergy of the city in his first sermon in 1810. When Grundtvig published the sermon 3 weeks later, it offended the ecclesiastical authorities, and they demanded him punished. In 1810 Grundtvig underwent a religious crisis and converted to a strongly held Lutheranism. He retired to his father's country parish in Udby as his chaplain. His newfound conviction was expressed in his The First World Chronicle of 1812, a presentation of European history in which he attempted to explain how belief in God has been viewed throughout human history and in which he criticized the ideology of many prominent Danes. It won him notoriety among his peers and cost him several friends, notably the historian Christian Molbech. Upon his father's death in 1813, Grundtvig applied to be his successor in the parish but was rejected. In the following years his rate of publication was staggering. Aside from a continuing stream of articles and poems, he wrote a number of books, including 2 more histories of the world, the long historical poem Roskilde Riim, and a book-sized commentary, Roskilde Saga. From 1816 to 1819 he was editor of and almost sole contributor to a philosophical and polemical journal entitled Danvik, which also published poetry. From 1813 to 1815, he attempted to form a movement to support the Norwegians against the Swedish government. Later he preached on how the weakness of the Danish faith was the cause of the loss of Norway in 1814. His sermon was met by an enthusiastic congregation in Copenhagen. Grundtvig withdrew from the pulpit because of lacking his own parish and being barred by other churches. In 1821 he resumed preaching briefly when granted the country living of Bredstedt, and returned to the capital the year after. In 1825 Grundtvig published a pamphlet, The Church's Rejoinder, a response to Henrik Nikolaj Clausen's work on the doctrines, rights and constitutions of Protestantism and Roman Catholicism. A professor of theology at the University of Copenhagen, Clausen argued that although the Bible was the principal foundation of Christianity, it was in itself an inadequate expression of its full meaning. He described the Church as a community for the purpose of advancing general religiousness. Quote, in his reply, Grundtvig denounced Clausen as an anti-Christian teacher and argued that Christianity was not a theory to be derived from the Holy Bible and elaborated by scholars. He questioned the right of theologians to interpret the Bible. Grundtvig was publicly prosecuted for libel and fined. The Church of Denmark forbade him to preach for 7 years. During this time he published a collection of theological works, visited England 3 times, and studied Anglo-Saxon. In 1832 Grundtvig obtained permission to again enter active ministry. In 1839 he was called as pastor of the workhouse church of VIAF Hospital in Copenhagen, a post he held until his death. Between 1837 and 1841 he published Sangvæk til den danske kirke, a rich collection of sacred poetry. In 1838 he brought out a selection of early Scandinavian verse. In 1840 he edited the Anglo-Saxon poem, the Phoenix, with a Danish translation. In 1843 he visited England for a 4th time. From 1844 until after the First Schleswig War, Grundtvig took a prominent part in politics, developing from a conservative into an absolute liberal. In 1861 he received the titular rank of bishop in the Church of Denmark, but without a see. He continued to write and publish until his death. He spoke from the pulpit at VIAF Church every Sunday until a few days before his death. His preaching attracted large congregations, and he soon had a following. His hymn book effected a great change in Danish church services, substituting the hymns of the national poets for the slow measures of the Orthodox Lutherans. In all, Grundtvig wrote or translated about 1,500 hymns, including God's Word is Our Great Heritage and Det Kommunale Julefest. Christian thinking. Grundtvig's theological development continued over his lifetime, and took a number of important turns. He moved from his Christian awakening of 1810 to believing in a congregational and sacramental Christianity in later years. He was most notable for the latter thinking. He always called himself a pastor, not a theologian, reflecting the distance between his ideas and academic theology. The chief characteristic of his theology was the substitution of the authority of the living Word for the apostolic commentaries. He desired to see each congregation act as a practically independent community. Thought on education. Grundtvig is the ideological father of the folk high school, though his own ideas on education had another focus. He advocated reforming the Yale Academy into a popular school aiming at another form of higher education than what was common at the university. Rather than educating learned scholars, he believed the university should educate its students for active participation in society and popular life. Thus, practical skills as well as national poetry and history should form an essential part of the instruction. This idea came very close to implementation during the reign of King Christian VIII, whose wife Caroline Amalia was an ardent supporter of Grundtvig. The death of the monarch in 1848 and the dramatic political development in Denmark during this and the following years put an end to these plans. However, by that time, one of Grundtvig's supporters, Christian Colt, had already established the first folk high school. Grundtvig's ambitions for school reform were not limited to the popular folk high school. He also dreamed of forming a great Nordic university to be situated at the symbolic point of intersection between the three Scandinavian countries. In Gothenburg, Sweden, the two pillars of his school program, the School for Life and the School for Passion, were aimed at quite different horizons of life. The popular education should mainly be taught within a national and patriotic horizon of understanding, yet always keeping an open mind towards a broader cultural and intercultural outlook, while the university should work from a strictly universal, i.e., humane and scientific outlook. The common denominator of all Grundtvig's pedagogical efforts was to promote a spirit of freedom, poetry and disciplined creativity within all branches of educational life. He promoted values such as wisdom, compassion, identification and equality. He opposed all compulsion, including exams, as deadening to the human soul. Instead, Grundtvig advocated unleashing human creativity according to the universally creative order of life. Only willing hands make light work. Therefore, a spirit of freedom, cooperation and discovery was to be kindled in individuals, in science, and in the civil society as a whole. Marriage and family. Grundtvig was married 3 times, the last time in his 76th year. His first wife, Elizabeth Blicher, was a clergyman's daughter. They were married in 1818 and had 3 children. His second wife, Marie Toft, was the daughter of a landowner. She died a few months after giving birth to a son. In 1858, he married Asta Reedth of an old aristocratic Danish family. His son Svend Grundtvig collected and edited Danish ballads. Legacy. Grundtvig's church in the Copenhagen district of Bredstedt was designed by Danish architect Peter Wilhelm Jensen Klint as a memorial to Grundtvig. Built of yellow brick in a neo-Gothic expressionist style, it was completed in 1940. Grundtvig International Secondary School in Nigeria is also named after him. It is an independent co-educational secondary school. His hymn De Levensland was chosen in 2006 as an item in the lyric anthology which forms part of the literature section of the Danish culture canon. Grundtvigian Forum is located at Vartov in central Copenhagen. Founded during 1898, it is a religious movement with a background in Grundtvigianism. Veneration. Grundtvig is commemorated on the 2nd of September as a renewer of the Church in the calendar of saints of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Grundtvig is honored with a feast day on the liturgical calendar of the Episcopal Church on the 8th of September. Bibliography. Editions. No comprehensive foreign language edition of his work exists. A 3-volume edition in German, however, is under preparation and projects for an English edition are in progress as well. Grundtvig's secular poetical works were published in a 9-volume edition, the first 7 volumes by his second son, the philologist Svend Grundtvig. The philological practice of this work, however, is not up to the standards of modern philology. His hymns have been collected in the philologically more stable 5-volume edition Grundtvig's Sangwerk. The best overall collection of his writings is the 10-volume edition Grundtvig's Udvalgte Skrifter edited by Holger Bigtra. His enormous oeuvre is presented in Steen Johansen, Bibliography over N.F.S.Grundtvigs Skrifter. The most important editions are Grundtvig's Sangwerk 1-6. Magnus Steeves, Copenhagen, Det Danske Forlag, 1948-64. Poetisk Skrifter 1-9. RGVAF Svend Grundtvig, Copenhagen, Carl Schonberg og Haldendal, 1880-1930. Udvalgte Skrifter 1-10. Holger Bigtra, Copenhagen, Jidendal, 1904-09. Værker I Udvalg 1-10. Halkochen Georg Christensen, Copenhagen, Jidendal, 1940-46. Bibliography Abrahamowitz, Finn, Grundtvig Danmark til Luca, Copenhagen, Hostenamp, Sons Forlag, ISBN 8714296128, Alchin, Arthur MacDonald, N.F.S.Grundtvig, Aarhus University Press, ISBN 8772888650, Reich, Eb Solskin og Lin, Grundtvig og Hans Sang til Livet, Copenhagen, Forlage Vartof, ISBN 8787389002, Johansen, Steen, Bibliography over N.F.S. Grundtvig's Skrifter 1-4, Copenhagen, Jadendal.